There are shows that lose their audience, there are shows that lose their stars. And then there's the Dukes of Hazzard, a show that lost both in the same year, because two guys in cowboy hats found one sentence in a corporate annual report and decided they'd had enough. By its third season, this show was the second most watched program on all of American television. Only Dallas beat it, and Dallas aired right after it, on the same night on the same network. 7 seasons, 147 episodes. A 27.3 Nielsen rating in the 1980 to 81 season, the kind of number networks don't see anymore. This wasn't a cult show. This was CBS's Friday night, and CBS's Friday night was the biggest night on television. And underneath all that success, there was a merchandising machine printing money so fast that nobody bothered to explain where it was going. Coming up, the 18-year-old who lied his way into the lead role, the single line in a company report that started a war, and the two stars who walked off their own hit show, sued the studio that made them famous, and got replaced by men who looked almost exactly like them. This is the rise, the money fight nobody saw coming, and the slow bleed that followed of the Dukes of Hazzard. Before we start, give this video a like if you ever watched Bo and Luke jump the General Lee over a river that was clearly 2 feet wide, and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Let's go all the way back to 1978. There's no Dukes of Hazzard yet. There's a low-budget movie called Moonrunners, about moonshine runners in the rural South, written and directed by a guy named Jai Waldron. It didn't make much noise, but Waldron thought there was a TV series hiding inside it, and he pitched it to Warner Brothers in 1978. CBS wasn't sure. Before the show even aired, the network's own programming chief sat in a room full of TV critics who tore the concept apart. The two leads looked like they were on the wrong side of the law. One of the female characters was dressed in almost nothing. One critic from North Carolina said the whole thing was an embarrassing stereotype of the South. CBS aired it anyway. Now, here's where the open loop starts. The most important piece of casting on this show almost didn't happen, and it happened because a teenager lied to a room full of adults. Producers wanted a country boy in his mid-20s to play Bo Duke. What they got walking through the door was an 18-year-old from New York named John Schneider. He didn't fit a single requirement, so he made some up. He showed up in a cowboy hat, cracked open a beer, spat some tobacco, and told the producers he was a graduate of a stunt driving school that, as far as anyone can tell, never existed. He also told them he could handle the car work himself. He couldn't, not the big jumps, but he was close enough, and more importantly, he was convincing. They believed the character standing in front of them and cast him on the spot. Tom Wopat came in right after for a screen test and got the role of Luke. Dennis Quaid was actually in the mix for that part too, but he wanted a package deal. His then-wife PJ Solis cast as the boy's cousin Daisy. Producers didn't think she fit. Quaid walked, Wopat got the job, and Quaid went off to have a pretty good movie career instead. Daisy went to Catherine Bach. The producers were looking for a Dolly Parton type. Bach didn't look anything like that description, and they hired her the same night anyway. She's the one who came up with the cut-off denim shorts herself over the network's objections about how short they were. Those shorts sold 5 million copies as a poster. They're also the reason Daisy Dukes is still a phrase in stores that have never heard of this show. By the time all 4 leads were locked, plus Denver Pyle as Uncle Jesse, Sorrel Book as Boss Hogg, and James Best as bumbling Sheriff Rosco P. Coltrane, the show had a cast nobody had picked for obvious reasons. And it worked anyway. One more name for later. James Best, sweet as he was on screen, had his own limit. At one point, he refused to film 5 episodes because the production hadn't given him a private dressing room to change in. Their solution was to just hose him down with a garden hose whenever he got dirty on set. Keep that one in your back pocket. It's a small thing. But it tells you something about how this production treated the people making it a hit, and it's not the last time that comes up. The show found its footing fast. By season 3, it was the second biggest thing on television, trailing only Dallas, which is the show CBS ran directly after it, so the two of them fed each other viewers all night. And then there was the car. The General Lee, an orange 1969 Dodge Charger with a horn that played Dixie, became bigger than any of the actors. Of the roughly 60,000 fan letters this show got every month, more than half of them were about the car. The production burned through somewhere around 300 Chargers over the run of the series. Most of them totaled in a single jump, because 1969 Chargers were getting hard to find even in 1980, and nobody could just order more. And that popularity turned into a merchandising business almost nobody was tracking closely except the people running it. Toys, t-shirts, yo-yos, coloring books, lunchboxes, Hot Wheels versions of the General Lee that outsold plenty of actual Hot Wheels cars. By one widely cited estimate, the Dukes brand pulled in something like $190 million in merchandise sales in 1981 alone. That's not the show's ratings number, that's just the toys, sitting on shelves with two actors' faces printed on the box. Meanwhile, the actual filming was grinding through cars like nobody's business because that dressing room James Best didn't get wasn't the only corner being cut. The production reportedly totaled an average of 2 Chargers per episode. Over 7 seasons, that adds up to somewhere around 300 destroyed cars, depending on whose count you trust. John Schneider himself puts it closer to 329. Either way, replacing a 10-year-old muscle car week after week gets expensive fast. Warner Brothers was spending real money to keep this machine running. It just wasn't spending it on the two guys whose faces sold the toys. What tore this apart from the inside had nothing to do with ratings. Wopat and Schneider had already been unhappy for a while. They wanted more depth in the scripts, more room for their characters to be actual people instead of the same chase over and over. The show's producer told them, more or less, that this wasn't Shakespeare, and their ideas didn't fit the formula. That stung. Add James Best getting hosed down instead of getting a dressing room, and you start to see a pattern of a studio that didn't think its cast was worth much beyond showing up on time. But the script complaints weren't the thing that made Wopat and Schneider walk. The thing that made them walk was a number. In the spring of 1982, as filming was about to start on season 5, Schneider says he and Wopat picked up Warner Communications' own annual report and read that the company had earned around $190 million in 1981 from Dukes of Hazzard merchandise. Their contracts were supposed to get them 5% of that. According to Schneider, they had each received $16,000. They did the math, it didn't add up, and they stopped showing up. On May 24th, 1982, Wopat and Schneider filed a $25 million lawsuit against Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers Television Distribution, the Licensing Corporation of America, and the Knickerbocker Toy Company. The suit accused the studio of running what it called sweetheart deals to cut them out of royalty money on toys, t-shirts, and coloring books. Their joint statement said, "The Duke boys sure wouldn't stand for being cheated, and neither will we." Warner's publicity VP called the whole thing a shock and said the company had lived up to the letter of the law. Warner countersued for $90 million, alleging breach of contract and libel. Even Uncle Jesse got dragged into it. Denver Pyle, asked by a reporter about the whole mess, called it a family squabble and said if the boys had money coming to them, they should get it. That's a strange thing to have to say about your own show's future, on the record, weeks before filming. At the time this lawsuit landed, the show was the number 7 program on all of television, season to date. Warner wasn't dealing with a struggling series and 2 disgruntled actors, it was dealing with a top 10 hit that had just lost its 2 lead characters, mid-negotiation, with cameras supposed to roll in weeks. So, Warner went looking for replacements. They screened over 2,000 applicants nationwide and landed on 2 actors who looked close enough to Bo and Luke to pass at a glance, Byron Cherry and Christopher Mayer, cast as cousins Coy and Vance Duke. Some of their scripts were literally Bo and Luke's old scripts with the names crossed out by hand and Coy and Vance written in. Jai Waldron, the man who created this whole show, argued against that approach directly. He said audiences wouldn't accept direct copies and that the new characters needed their own identity. He was overruled. Waldron was right. Audiences did not accept it. Coy and Vance debuted in September 1982, and the ratings did not recover. They collapsed. According to Schneider, the show's audience share dropped from 37% down to 29%, and viewership in the 18 to 49 demographic fell by more than 40%. Warner's own toy division reportedly lost somewhere between $20 and $30 million because Duke's merchandise stopped moving off shelves the second the real Bo and Luke were gone. Warner blinked first. By December 1982, both lawsuits were dropped. Wopat and Schneider agreed to come back. Cherry and Mayer, who'd done nothing wrong except get hired into an impossible position, were let go without ceremony. In February 1983, the original Duke boys returned to Hazzard County, and their joint statement this time said they were happy to be back with their family on the show. So here's the number that actually explains everything that happened to this show. In 1981, the Dukes of Hazzard brand made close to $190 million for its studio in merchandise revenue alone, on top of whatever the show itself was worth to CBS in advertising. Its 2 lead actors, the faces on every one of those lunchboxes and yo-yos and coloring books, say they received $16,000 each that year. Not $16,000 a week. 16,000, period. That gap is the entire story. Everything else, the lawsuit, the replacements, the ratings crash, is just what happens after two people finally see a number they weren't supposed to see. And that gap never fully closed for the show itself. Wopat and Schneider came back, but the audience that had watched Coy and Vance flop and watched their favorite show turn into a headline about a lawsuit didn't come back at the same size. The show ran 2 more seasons after the reunion. It never cracked the top 10 again. So what happened to everybody after Hazzard County went quiet in February 1985? John Schneider kept acting for decades and picked up a whole new generation of fans decades later, playing Jonathan Kent on Smallville. Tom Wopat moved toward music and Broadway. Catherine Bach worked steadily for years and eventually joined the cast of The Young and the Restless in 2012. Ben Jones, who played the mechanic Cooter, had the strangest second act of anyone on this list. He ran for Congress in Georgia in 1986 and lost. He ran again in 1988 after his opponent got indicted for perjury, won by 20 points, and served 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. He still runs a chain of Dukes-themed shops called Cooter's Place. Sorrel Book, who played Boss Hogg, had a real Broadway pedigree underneath that white suit, a Yale drama degree, and a leading role in the musical Fiorello. He died in 1994. Denver Pyle, Uncle Jesse, died in 1997. Rick Hurst, who played Cletus, passed away just last year. Christopher Mayer, one half of the short-lived Coy and Vance experiment, died in 2011. And the flag on the roof of the General Lee, which nobody thought twice about in 1979, became its own separate reckoning decades later. In 2015, TV Land pulled the reruns, and Warner Brothers stopped making toy versions of the car. That's a different story for a different video. This one was never really about the flag or even the car, it was about a piece of paper 2 actors weren't supposed to read closely. The Duke boys wouldn't stand for being cheated, neither would the guys who played them. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give the video a like and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Thanks for watching.